Evening, everyone. It's 6:30 p.m. on February 27th, and I will call the regular meeting of the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District to order. The first item on our agenda is setting of the meeting agenda.
Roll call first.
Oh, sorry. Roll call, please.
All right. Manager Lowe,
Here.
Manager Schmaltz,
Here.
Manager Baki,
Here.
Manager Taves,
Here.
President Anderson.
Here. Thank you. First item is setting a meeting agenda. Are there any additions or changes? Okay, hearing none. There's a motion. Will someone please make a motion to accept the agenda?
I will make the motion to accept the agenda.
Thank you, Manager Baki. Is there a second?
I will second that.
Okay, thank you, Manager Taves. Next is the consent. Roll call.
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Schmaltz,
Here.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
President Anderson.
Aye, thank you. Next item is the consent agenda, and we have 5 previous meetings going back to November 2024, special meeting in January on 7th, regular board meeting on the 9th, regular board meeting minutes on January 23rd, and also special meeting on January 28th. Are there any changes or comments? If not, this is a consent agenda item, so we can move all of this at one time. Is there?
Just note that
Yeah.
the letter E was not posted in this agenda.
Okay,
So I would suggest removing that.
I don't think do we have to do that?
I don't know, they just weren't, there wasn't anything to look at, so I wasn't sure if you could approve them without seeing them.
Oh, I see. So this is, okay, this was blank. All right, let's remove item E then, per advice of staff, and we will pick that up at the first meeting in February. All right, so we have 4 items. Is there a motion to accept the consent agenda minus E?
I'll move to accept the consent agenda other than E.
Thank you. Manager Schmaltz, is there a second?
I will second that.
Thank you, Manager Taves. Okay,
Right,
roll call.
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
President Anderson.
Aye. Next item is public open forum. Do we have any visitors tonight? Tori?
Nope.
Okay, I'll call one more time. Is there anyone present who would like to speak to the board? Okay, let's move on. Number 5, Citizen Advisory Committee update and appointment. Who's gonna do this one, Adam?
President Anderson, I can intro some topics while we wait for Administrator Kinney to join if you'd like.
Sure, thank you.
So for this month's Citizen Advisory Committee update, the 2-parter, there's the update and the meeting notes are in the packet. Items of discussion at the February 18th CAC meeting included the Lower St. Croix Ag Outreach presentation. Meeting gave an update on watershed activities, including the aerators, outreach materials, things like that. Adam had given an education and outreach update, and Tom Fury was elected the chair for the month of March. And then the Citizen Advisory Committee received an application for a new member that would like to join from Keith Coonley, a resident of Forest Lake. And so there is a recommended action to appoint him to the Citizen Advisory Committee.
What lake was this person from?
Forest Lake.
Forest Lake.
Forest.
Oh, Forest Lake, I'm sorry, thank you. All right. So are we ready to do the appointment for the Citizens Advisory Committee?
Um,
Would you give that name again, please?
Keith, and I believe the last name is pronounced, anybody knows.
Cooley,
Okay.
Cooley. President Anderson, actually, we're on the update and the appointment is actually item B. So we should dispense with the update, item A first, I think. If there are any questions on the report that was given. And they have the wrong sheet up. This is actually item B that's on the screen.
Yes, I see, Mhm. Well, the update doesn't really, we're not required to do any action on that, so that's just an update. So let's do 5B.
Okay,
Appointment to Citizen Advisory Committee, the new members, potential new member is, name is Keith Cooley. All right, is there a motion?
I'll move to appoint Keith Cooley to the Citizen Advisory Committee.
Okay, thank you. Manager Smalls, is there a second? I'll second.
All right, any more discussion?
Yeah, is there any more discussion on the issue? Hearing none, roll call, please.
All right, Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
President Anderson.
Aye. Okay, moving on. We have a number 6 new business, but there's nothing attached to it, so I'm assuming there is.
Put that there in case there was.
Okay, I see an addition or something. Thank you. All right, we'll skip to old business then. Number 7A, Minnesota Watersheds Delegate Appointments.
Madam President and managers, this item was discussed at the last board meeting. Manager Anderson or President Anderson provided an update then of there's an upcoming meeting and managers were asked to think about who would like to be a delegate and an alternate for this.
There's two delegates and 1 alternate. It's just a regular business meeting of the organization Minnesota Watersheds. And it's going to be in Waite Park. I don't think we have a specific address just yet, but that's up by St. Cloud. And I indicated that I would go. But if there are others, we need 2 more.
Do we know what time the meeting's going to be?
I don't have any of that detail yet, but my guess is it'll be sometime late morning. So people have a chance to get up there in the same day and not have to rent a hotel. But we don't have all of that data yet, unless you've seen something, Tori.
I've not seen anything.
Okay. Anyone want to volunteer?
I could attend. I think I'm open, at least now. Nothing has come up, so I could
Okay.
possibly go.
Okay, good. Anyone else to be the alternate? All right. Well, I think we have the 2 folks that will be going, myself and Manager Schmalz. So let's make a motion on that. I'll just make that a motion that the 2 delegates to the Minnesota Watersheds special meeting, business meeting to take place in Waite Park will be Managers Anderson and Manager Schmalz. And that's the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. There's no discussion, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Taves. You're muted.
Aye.
President Anderson.
Aye. Thank you, board. Motion passes. Next item, 7B, Forest Lake Alum Treatment Monitoring Update.
Madam President and managers, Dr. Wilkinson from EOR is here to present an update on the Forest Lake Alum Treatment Monitoring. Go ahead, Ann.
Great. Good evening, Madam President and managers. I'm gonna talk about the data that we collected to evaluate the first dose of the alum treatment on Forest Lake, the Middle Basin. So for an introduction, Clean Water Fund was awarded to complete 2 alum treatments on Forest Lake Middle Basin as recommended by the in-lake feasibility study, and that award was given in 2023. The first alum treatment dose was applied in fall of 2023. And then we built into the grant to collect this post-treatment monitoring in 2024 to evaluate the effectiveness and continue on our path of adaptive management. So if there were any adjustments that we needed to make based on how the alum treatment was performed, the first half of the alum treatment was performing, we could do that. The information that I'm gonna share for that post treatment monitoring is water chemistry, so hypolimitic orthophosphorus and sediment core data analysis. And then with the plan of having the second and final dose applied in fall 2025, so this fall. Just give a quick reminder of what we're talking about when we talk about nutrient cycling in lakes. We have several different avenues for phosphorus to enter the lake, primarily through watershed loading, which we do our BMPs and our external load analysis. And then we also have internal loading. And so this is phosphorus released from sediments that have accumulated through legacy loading into the lake. So as that watershed load is washing in sediments, they're accumulating at the bottom of the water column, and then under low dissolved oxygen conditions, they can actually release phosphorus back into the water column. And so we complete a lot of monitoring on the different lakes in the district to evaluate if that phosphorus is being released and accumulating in the hypolimnion. And so that is what we observed in Forest Lake Middle, and it was one of the drivers for these alum treatments. Just another reminder of the recommended management approach from that 2023 grant was to conduct the alum treatment in the Middle Basin. It's common practice to split the total aluminum dose into 2 separate applications so that we can evaluate how the initial dose is performing within the lake itself. And then the additional dose was, again, like I said, in fall 2023. And then a year of monitoring, and then the second and final dose in fall 2025. Like I said, again, this is consistent with the district's adaptive management philosophy of applying the second dose, waiting after we have that effectiveness monitoring completed, to allow for any changes in the design of the alum treatment and the second dose to be more accurate and cost effective. And then kind of fortuitously, we also were collecting data in sediment cores after a very wet year that delivered a lot of runoff to the lake. So we could see how well that alum treatment was performing, even with a high load that could come in and cover it up. So it was kind of fortuitous for that reason as well, to wait until if we could see, you know, how much that runoff, external runoff, was going to affect the longevity of the treatment. So just want to remind everyone again, this is from the 2023 progress report. The alum treatment represents a large load reduction that gets us to about 93% towards our goal after the alum treatment. So it's a large project that gets us closer to the goal for Forest Lake.
That's after the second treatment.
After the second treatment, that's correct. This is the application area of the alum treatment. So this yellow circle represents about 106 acres. It also represents the contour that's deeper than 15 feet deep. The reason that was chosen was because we were observing low dissolved oxygen conditions deeper than 15 feet. So we wanted to target that area because we knew that it was susceptible to internal load and phosphorus release. Okay, so the way that we measure alum treatment effectiveness is looking at sediment analysis and hypolimitic or bottom orthophosphate concentrations. And so what we expect to see after the alum treatment is a decrease in what we call redox B, but this is the phosphorus pool that's available to be released under low oxygen conditions. So we expect that to reduce in those sediment cores, and we expect to see an increase of the aluminum bound phosphorus. So that shows us that the aluminum in the alum has bound to that phosphorus instead of having it available to be released. And we also took sediment cores and we incubated them, put them under low oxygen conditions, and we can actually measure how much phosphorus they're releasing. So we also took that measurement as well, and we're anticipating after the alum treatment a decrease of that release rate because that pool of releasable phosphorus has decreased and the permanently bound aluminum phosphorus has been converted. And then we took grab samples, and we'd also expect a decrease in the hypolimitic or the bottom layer orthophosphate concentrations. That's the form of phosphorus that's released under these low oxygen conditions. I do want to point out here, and this is something that we want to keep continuing to talk about when we talk about these 2024 results as they come out in the next couple months, is that surface phosphorus concentrations are not a direct measure of internal loading or internal line control because of the influences that this runoff has on those concentrations. So there's a lot more going on when we look at surface phosphorus concentrations. So we're gonna really rely on these sediment analysis and hypolimitic orthophosphate concentrations because there's no other drivers for those except internal loading.
Wonderful.
So the first, I'm just gonna go through these quickly. I know that not everyone
Can I
likes.
ask a question?
Yes,
When you say there's no external loading, right, in that, is that just that one basin or all of the lake?
there is external loading coming
Okay.
in. Yeah,
Oh, there is,
yeah.
but it's,
There's no influence of external loading in the hypolimnion or to these sediment
layers.
conditions.
Okay.
Yes.
so it's not enough to really,
Right, we're not seeing any nutrient upwelling
Mhm.
from groundwater or influences in sometimes deeper lakes or reservoirs. You can have like a downwelling
Mhm.
of really cold water that can get
Mhm.
into the deeper layers of the lake. We're not seeing any of that. This
so
is all
it
from-
means that those open sort of little dead-end streets that used to be, there's like 100 some around the lake, those are not influencing the phosphorus level in the lake.
No, they are.
They
So
are, okay.
the influence of the external loading we see in the surface water
Okay.
phosphorus concentrations, not in the bottom water concentrations. The bottom water concentrations are physically separated from the surface because of the temperature gradient. It causes a steep density change that doesn't allow that water to mix
Okay.
under stratified conditions.
Alright.
So, but yes, the surface water concentrations are definitely influenced by runoff, and we'll kind of talk about that at the end.
Okay,
But these measurements that I'm gonna talk about are specific to internal loading, so that's our bottom phosphorus concentrations and our sediment
good,
core
well, thank
data.
you.
Yeah. This is comparing that releasable phosphorus pool, so we can see these are average, the dots represent averages, and this is actually what the phosphorus concentrations look like at every 2 centimeters within the sediment cores we collected. And so we can see the orange represents the pre-treatment or pre-alum sediment conditions, and then the blue represents the post, and we can see quite a significant reduction in that orthophosphorus pool, which is what we want to see. So it's looking really good. And then again, we want to see that.
And,
redox B-
excuse me, can I have a question?
Yes.
Sure, go
Can you
ahead.
Back to the other chart. So actually, we actually had, how many, it looks like we had on the treatment or pre-treatment cores, we must have had 6 cores we took. Is that correct?
On the pre-treatment cores, we had 4. These dots that you're seeing, those 6 dots, are the depth within an individual core. So what we're looking at is this is the sediment core depth. We take slices of that sediment and digest them to measure phosphorus content at every 2 centimeter slice. And these dots represent an average of those 4 locations on the lake. And then
Okay.
the error bars represent the minimum and maximum. So, you know,
Right.
there is very heterogeneity around a lake, and it's more observed pre-treatment, which we would expect. And then after the alum treatment, those are treated, and so that that variability decreases, which is also a good thing. It means we've seen a good distribution of the aluminum. Does
So
that-
basically, so like for 1 centimeter and 3 centimeters, you had actually 4 samples from the 4 cores at each of those depths, correct? And so
Correct,
is that why the standard deviation is so high from 0.3 to actually 1.4? That's like a 70% standard deviation. So there's quite a bit of variability with just
There
4
is quite a bit of
samples.
variability. Yep.
So why does that
So-
drop off after you get deeper than 5 centimeters?
So that's a good question. So for the sediment cores pre-treatment, there are, there's less influence of, you know, denser sediments moving around. It's a more static system because it's just very buried in, because it's 9 centimeters down into the water column.
Okay. All right.
Does that make sense?
Okay, thank you. I just wondered because that's, it's interesting to see that kind of change, but it makes sense because the deeper you go, the less a lot less disruption might occur. There's a lot of disruption at the surface, obviously, and not so much 8 or 9 centimeters down. So that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes. So this is a similar plot, but looking at the aluminum bound phosphorus. And so for the alum treatment, we see a change from that redox bound phosphorus that's releasable to an aluminum bound phosphorus that's not releasable under any natural condition that happens on the lake. So that's a good thing as well. And what we want to see, we also can look at the phosphorus release rate. So this is simulating low oxygen conditions in the lab to look at how much phosphorus is released from the water column into the water column, essentially. So this is a direct measure of what phosphorus is being released. Pre-treatment, it was 13, and then post-treatment, it came down to 5. So that's about a 60% decrease. That's really good and what we would expect. And then we can look at the.
Can I ask Excuse
Oh,
me,
yeah,
can
go
I
ahead.
ask a question again? I got my
Yeah.
hand up, but nobody's noticing, so
Oh,
it's
I'm
okay.
sorry.
That's all right. So if we go back to that previous chart of this one,
Yes,
so we got the same chart here after the treatment, but we're looking at aluminum phosphate, right, which is the tied up phosphorus. So why would there be any aluminum phosphate at all down below? So is that a natural occurring situation, or I'm talking about the
Yeah.
groove lines?
yeah, aluminum is there's a high percent of aluminum in the Earth's crust naturally occurring.
Okay, so that probably gets pulled in from the atmospheric rain and so forth, then into the bottom eventually, and adds up over a long period of time.
Yeah,
So then the
it's
other
what we-
question I have is why is there less after we dump all this aluminum phosphate in there, alum treatment in there? Why is there now less aluminum phosphate than there was before? So you
Yeah.
see, your last 3 or 4 points are below what it was before we treat it. So if you dump all this aluminum phosphate in there, how can it be lower than what it was before you treated it?
Sure.
I guess that's the
So-
question I have.
Yeah, what's happening here is for the aluminum phosphate that was added into the lake during the alum treatment, that is not very dense, especially with the first application. So it is sitting on top of the water of the sediment column. And so that variability that you're seeing in the deeper sediments is kind of a sampling variability that you can see. So we can see that we have some variability compared to when we sampled, 2 years later in those deeper sediments, but the overlap kind of shows that there is, some overlap amongst that variability. But you're right, we would expect under ideal sampling conditions, if we were able to go out the exact same place, that those dots would completely overlap.
Okay,
We did not remove aluminum from the system, during this alum treatment. It's just that we're seeing that variability down there. Ideally, when we see the second alum treatment, we want to see that peak of aluminum bound phosphorus go down to that -3 centimeters or even deeper than that. That's what we're trying to dose to. But usually with that first dose, you're not able to get, it's kind of sitting at the top still.
okay, so it takes a while to settle down and move into the bottom.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. These are all questions that might come up if we make a presentation on this. That's why I'm asking them
I
right now.
agree.
So we
Yeah.
at least understand the rationale, what's actually happening from a chemistry aspect. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so we saw about a 60% decrease of that releasable, that release rate. So that's a really nice, a nice reduction. So now we're gonna look at the orthophosphate concentrations. This is something that we continually measure on Forest Lake as part of our monitoring plan. So we had pre-treatment data. We also looked at, we have the bottom, so that's the hypolimnetic, that's that orange samples. And then we have a metalimnetic, which is kind of the middle where our thermocline is. The reason that we were looking at that was to see if there was any nutrient diffusion through that layer and kind of help us understand what the mixing conditions are. We can see that pre-alum treatment, we have a really high buildup of orthophosphate in that hypolimnion in the summer of 2023. That's when anoxic conditions were present on those native sediments pre-treatment, and we were seeing it just pump out high concentrations of orthophosphorus. The issue with this is that when fall turnover begins, that orthophosphorus is then mixed into the water column, and orthophosphate is really bioavailable, meaning that algae can use it immediately without much transformation. And so it gets eaten up by algae and transformed into blooms really quickly. So we want to avoid that buildup and then re-release to the surface where algae are present to use it up and grow exponentially. So what's really nice to see is that we've reduced that orthophosphate after the alum treatment, and then that reduction has continued to be observed into 2024 with just a little bit of increases in that really the dead of summer, essentially, when you've had a lot of anoxia for a long period of time. And then, with that second alum treatment, hopefully eliminate those little blips as well. Any questions on this one? There were some miscellaneous questions that came up either at board meetings or from the public about the alum treatment. The first was this occurrence of Eurasian water milfoil in the Middle Basin in 2024. We did consult with Blue Water Science. When Connor was here, he kind of touched on it as well, but I did call Steve and chat about this last year when we were seeing it. That the spread of that Eurasian water milfoil happened before the alum treatment, because by the time the alum was applied, those plants were dormant and had already dropped their seeds. So that's that it was also able to propagate because there was low water conditions at that time, and Eurasian water milfoil apparently can propagate quite easily in low water conditions. He also pointed out that and I Connor touched on this as well, during that first year, they likely hybridized, and hybrid milfoil can also exhibit what they call hybrid vigor, which means it's very prevalent in those first couple of years and then kind of stabilizes. So we're hoping that that will be observed again, or that vigor will reduce as we kind of hypothesize, and then we will kind of be able to keep it more under control. But I know that was a concern. It did coincide, honestly, with the right after the alum treatment, but it was the timing of it doesn't seem to work out. Also, just want to point out, you know, the barges and everything, you know, all the alum equipment were inspected to make sure that they were not
Yeah.
delivering
Good.
invasives into the lake itself, so.
We're taking them away.
Yeah, exactly. There was also a question, I believe, Manager Smaltz brought up right after the alum treatment, in which the application was occurring during some high wind events. We wanted to also look at, to make sure that the flocks weren't moving around, and that from what we could see from our sediment cores, that the alum was distributed as evenly as possible, or as evenly as we would expect. And so we did look at that, and that aluminum fraction of the sediments observed was not out of the ordinary or show any indication of changes in deposition by wind. I will also point out that in the specs for the alum treatments, we have a stipulation about how high winds they can apply during, so that they can stay on course, and that we don't have high waves. So, and they were also within spec of that morning, but it is something that we were able to also observe in the sediment course, so that's good too. And we'll keep an eye on that again when we apply this second. So I want to just kind of bring this home. There's evidence to support the second alum treatment. We have additional phosphorus reductions needed to control the internal load as observed by pools of redox phosphorus, and also kind of further reducing that release rate. We would expect to have about a 75 to 90% reduction in release rate, and right now we're at 60%. So there's still work to be done on that. There's also a risk of that underdosing and alum treatment significantly shortens the longevity, because those sites are built up. There's diffusion from deeper sediments. Ideally, we would want to get that aluminum bound phosphorus deeper into that sediment column, so that diffusion is cut off. So that's why we're suggesting going forward as well. And then based on adaptive management, we also we revisited the dose, and based on the current redox pool that's still there, we would like to ideally increase that dose by 20%. So that we can go after a more favorable binding efficiency, and also eliminate what's still down there. And there are grant funds available. We need to engage with the contractor to make sure that we can have those additional volumes. So that's what we're suggesting. Outcomes for the alum treatment. We saw a reduction of that releasable phosphorus. We're going to hopefully continue to see a reduction in that orthophosphate, and also not observing it mixing into the hypolimnion or the epilimnion or the surface water. And then long term, we are turning off that internal load faucet, so we would like to see a reduction in the average epilimnetic phosphorus concentrations due to that load reduction, especially following any periods of turnover where that bottom water mixes in with the surface. And so we will continue to monitor that. And then the next steps are to engage with the contractors as soon as possible to get a favorable date for the second and final application in fall of 2025. I do want to quickly talk about surface water phosphorus concentrations. Steve, I know that you had asked about this, I believe yesterday. These are preliminary data from the CAMP program. This is total phosphorus in the Middle Basin and SECIDEP in the Middle Basin. That blue dotted line represents the state standard, and then the black line represents the first alum treatment. I do want to point out that although, you know, we can see the influence of this high runoff year, but overall the seasonal average is still below 30 micrograms per liter. So that's a favorable result that we're still able to seasonally stay under there, but we can see that kind of past into August, we have quite an increase in total phosphorus in the surface layer there. And then, like I said, since we all know that that's not from any the phosphorus building up in the water column, that's all from that high loads that we got from a really rainy season in 2024. And we will talk more about this when we have the final 2024 monitoring plan. But I know, Steve, you wanted to take a look at this as well to see how we were doing.
No, because I know when after you treated it, I went out there about the day after, 2 days later, and I mean, before that it was green. And it was really clear. I mean, I couldn't believe how all that algae disappeared in 2 days. So it really sucked a lot out. But now I'm equally surprised that it's that high the following year only because of inflows coming in. So it's kind of interesting to see that. You gotta, it only comes in a certain way. I mean, we're not getting a lot of from the rain coming out of the sky. It gets a pretty small contribution. It's got to be coming in from inflows along the shoreline, right?
Yeah, and also, you know, the 2024 was a difficult year for runoff across the state because the antecedent conditions or the prior 2 years were very dry. So there was an accumulation of a lot of phosphorus and sediments that were on the landscape that are going to get washed in during this really high flow that we had in 2024. All of our modeling is based on an average precipitation year, and 2024 was not an average precipitation year. So although you know, we reduced our loads from our BMPs by a large percentage, by about 80%, the target load is still based on an average year. So the load reduction we'd need for a really high year, that's a larger reduction, right? So all of our modeling is based on an average year, not kind of a worst case scenario. Even though on an average year, we made sure to include both dry and wet years. However, the wet year, this was a wetter year, and the wet year did not include that antecedent dry years that had that accumulation on the landscape. It is kind of interesting though too to see on that seasonal average, we are still able to meet goals, which is really exciting. And it just kind of shows that also these models are based on annual averages, not instantaneous results. And so we know that lakes are more dynamic than that. So it's important to think about all those things when we think about the effectiveness of our efforts.
Yeah,
I think that's right.
I monitor Lake One, and so I know this year, I mean, last year, I could just tell by the samples I was taking and the change in water clarity, which was worse, that this was one of the worst years we had after we had 3 or 4 really good years. So I think we need to actually, and I think Blaine Eichner mentioned this in our discourse back and forth with emails, that, you know, we've got to be able to figure out and maybe measure what's going on, because we know that Forest Lake has almost been deforested along the shorelines. We're number 2 out of 836 lakes, the bottom 2, right? Bottom 1%. So it'd be interesting to see if you take like a lake like that's got a good shoreline, like what's the one that that's really good here that we have that's, I can't think of.
Keewatin.
Yeah,
Keewatin.
Keewatin. How Keewatin responds to the extra rain? Does it go up much or not? Because its shoreline is more protected. And maybe even Bone Lake would be, which has got a, got a pretty good shoreline on it. See how they react.
And Comfort Lake.
Yeah, I mean, Comfort
And
Lake
Little
too, if
Falls.
you got a good shoreline
Little Falls.
coverage at a higher scoreline score, you could begin to plot those. And the goal would be to show the people on Forest Lake that we're not just blowing wind here, that there is a real correlation and we can actually show it with data. And that would
Yeah.
help convert a lot of people's attitudes and help bring down the resistance we're seeing with data, which is what we always use. But so we need to think about how to do that. I first of all appreciate the short notice that you had to respond to here by getting these graphs out. It's really important that we continue to move ahead with that analysis and try to figure out what kind of correlations versus shoreline conditions might show, might tell a story for us. So thanks for that
Yeah,
extra
really.
effort to get this out in one day. I didn't get a chance to see this until yesterday, and I didn't give you much notice, so I apologize for that. But thanks for the quick response.
I think that's a great suggestion, and we have all the data available to do that.
And it's going to take a while, and we got to go back a number of years because we had before, we had a lot of rain 5 or 6 years ago,
Right.
3 or 4 years in a row. So we've got some good dry and wet seasons to do the same analysis on the same lakes with the same shoreline conditions, and
Yeah.
maybe get some reproducibility and a higher confidence level in the correlations we're running.
Thank you, Manager Schmalz. Anyone else have a comment or question?
President Anderson,
Yes, Manager Bucky.
I just would like to know if the dosage is increased by 20% for the second treatment. Do we know what that additional cost will be, and do we have the grant funds in the budget to cover that?
That's a great question. We have to engage with the contractor to determine that additional cost. So the sooner we can do that, the better.
Mhm.
We do have quite a bit of extra grants because the first quote came in far under the
Mhm.
engineer's estimate. So I'm pretty confident that we'll be able to have that. The only thing that might be a complication is that alum does come from Canada. And so the
Okay,
sooner we can get on this before the tariffs come, the better.
but they were already here.
There's a pause.
Oh, there's a pause now? Okay.
Oh, it got resumed? Okay,
Yeah.
well, we'll talk with
That's what I
we'll
think.
talk with the contractors.
Okay, so, but the grant that we got was inclusive of the second treatment.
Correct.
You're just saying we want to alter that second treatment for 20% more coverage.
Yes.
Okay. And that's what has to be made up with additional grant dollars? Or do you think we have enough because of the savings?
No, we should have enough in the current.
Okay,
grant.
so we don't need any additional funds?
No.
Okay, all right. Does that answer your question, Manager Baki?
Yes, and I do have an extra can of alum on my shelf if you need. So
Perfect.
I use it to take out tea stains in my cups.
Oh,
It works
yeah.
great. I have a question on the mixing, here. You were describing how, the, alum is sitting on top, it's not mixing. Is that due to less activity? Or is it, and I'm talking about action, people,
Mhm.
action. Or is it, maybe just a calm period for weather where you're not getting the wind that would mix it up as well?
Yeah, so actually more activity from fish or from boats that can have deeper influence into the water column
Mhm.
actually would move that around and not keep it where it is.
Mhm.
This is just a density difference,
Okay.
and so that should continue to sink down. Ideally, we want to keep it as calm as possible.
Okay.
So that it can.
So you want the
slowly
mix to be
move it.
up and down and not spread out? Okay.
Right.
All right, I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? All right, let's move on.
Thanks,
That was
Ann.
just-
Good work.
Just a discussion item. North Shore Trail is the next old business under 7C. North Shore Trail Road Reconstruction Project. Are you handling that one as well?
I can handle.
All right.
The introduction.
Thank you.
President. So, Skin or the city of Forest Lake, it's planning, on doing a mill and overlay work on North Shore Trail. Spanning from Greenway Avenue to Highway 97. So the majority of the work would not trigger our stormwater rules. Some minor components of the project could, but we still have not received the final, or we have not received a permit application from the city. So we do not know if our stormwater rule will be triggered. The city of Forest Lake also held a public meeting on February 18th, that the president and manager Schmaltz attended. During that public meeting, the main concerns were pedestrian paths, traffic speeds, access during construction, and flooding issues. And today at the floodwater or floodplain management meeting, Greg Grasky and I did speak to the city about the project a little further. And based off of those public comments, portions of this project could be pushed back to next year, which could allow us to potentially partner with the city on some projects. EOR has been out on North Shore Trail looking at possible project locations on publicly owned land. But we are kind of waiting on more action from the city before we have to wait for them to finalize what they want their plans to be. And as I said, we are still waiting for the permit application.
Thank you. So you are working with the city though, it sounds like, correct?
Comfort Watershed District staff and EOR are both working with the city and, advocating for projects to be put in.
Mm-hmm. Very good. That's an improvement from last message. Any questions or comments on this topic? No? All right. Thank you for that update. Appreciate it. Let's move on then to report of administrator. Under 8A.
Madam President, managers, I think Administrator Kinney might have been delayed. He had said he thought he could join us by 7, but he's still at the conference and perhaps is delayed. But the administrator's report is posted in the board packet. There's a number of updates in there about ongoing activities and things. So maybe I'll just ask if there's any questions.
I don't have any. Does anybody else have any questions?
No.
Comments? Okay, I have one comment, but I have to wait until Mike's back in town under the Comfort Lake area. There's nothing listed, but we actually talked, oh boy, it's been even last year, the end of last year, on the CARP survey that we did with county money. Actually, it's federal money for AIS projects. And so we started the invasive carp project just by doing the counting. That was the first phase. We're still waiting on that first report. So the second phase would be something that would have to be turned over to the watershed. And that's actually what we did with the other lakes is, do the tracking, probably through recording of some kind and corralling of some kind so that we can make sure we know where they're coming from. And so that's both for Little and Big Comfort. I just wanted to discuss that with the board here just to introduce it to you. But anyway, that's the only thing. I just wanted to see what the update was on that. But it's hard to do the second phase when you don't have the first phase information. I did go to the seminar there, where the session that we had, public outreach on invasive carp, and there was at least some data on those slides that showed us that both Little Comfort and Big Comfort are over the ceiling that our area lakes have from the DNR. Little Comfort is slightly above, and then Big Comfort is about 20–30% more than that. So we do have an issue that we need to address. So that'll come in the future. That was my only comment. Okay, next is EOR.
Yeah, good evening, Madam President, managers again. In addition to the projects that we just discussed, we are also actively looking, completing the 2024 monitoring plan that will be coming next for next month. We are also completing the 2025 monitoring plan and also putting together the scope for the accelerated implementation grant work plan for the Sunrise Diagnostic Study. And those are very intertwined. Essentially, there'll be a lot of overlap amongst those two scopes. Taking some diagnostic monitoring in the 2025 plan to support those other efforts in the accelerated implementation grant study. So those will work well together. Also, Greg did go, he was in town today. He did go and do some site visits for the North Shore Trail project area and was able to kind of observe the public lands that are available in that area and said that there are some possible project opportunities. However, you know, it's really dependent on the implementation schedule.
Right. Well, you're monitoring that closely,
Yes.
both, yeah, internal and your staff, so that's good.
Yeah.
We just want to know that it's being monitored, it's being watched, and we're making some progress.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, next is report of the treasurer.
No,
Oh, I'm sorry, Smith Partners. Sorry, Chuck.
I have nothing to report, Madam Chair.
Well, thank you for sharing. Next is the report of the treasurer.
Good evening. Income this month was $57,045.19. And over half of that came from two items. One was a $14,736 payment from Forest Lake, which was part of the tri-party agreement that we had with Forest Lake and the Lake Association. The city actually owed us money because we spent more than they did, so that's where the $14,000 came from. And then we also had a large grant of $27,592 coming from the MPCA on our climate action plan and floodplain work. So those were two good contributions. Our total expenses for the months were $160,521.92. And so I'd like to ask the board to approve payment of that amount for this month. And then finally, we also have a transfer required today of $166,200 to cover our payments for the coming month. So if we could have a motion to pay that $160,521.92, would be great.
I'll make that motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Manager Taves. Any further discussion? Okay, roll call.
All right, Manager Logue.
Aye.
Manager Schmaltz.
Aye.
Manager Baki.
Aye.
Manager Taves.
Aye.
President Anderson.
Aye. Thank you. Next item, report of officers and managers.
President Anderson,
Yes.
I do have a question regarding the fund balance. If we could ask the treasurer he has a page in there addressing the increase in the fund balance. And I was just wondering if Steve, you could talk us through that a little bit. I'm just trying to understand what that means. You know which page I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's the last page here, 2025 fund balance, right? It's at $1,197,000. And I have not a chance to look at this in any detail, but it's probably because of our income that was coming in. Well, what we got in we have a starting fund balance of 1,338,000. We have year-to-date income funds, which was 57,000. And then we have year-to-date expenditures of 198,000. So that's why the fund dropped down, because we spent 140,000 more than we took in. So the fund balance dropped from 1,338 down to 1,197. You follow that, Dave?
Yes, thank you for explaining that. I was just, because I noticed on the next page, it does talk about fund balance being 1.3 million, but that's as of the end of January.
Right,
So we had more income evidently.
right, right.
Got it. Thank you.
And that's why we need so much cash in that fund to cover our costs. And because we got all the money in now at the first of the year, right? We got from Washington County and from Chisago. That's got to run us till June or July when we get the next big payment. You know, $500,000 from Washington County and a bunch of money from Chisago. And that's why the fund has to be that large, at least 6 months worth of supply to cover our costs until we get that money coming in.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, let's move on then to the report of officers and managers. I'll just call out in whatever order, random order. Manager Baki, we'll start with you.
Yes, I'd just like to give you an update on the SMART goals. I did go through our SMART goals from last year and pulled out those that were not completed. And I did write that up in a new format and gave it to Mr. Kinney for his review. I did send him an email today, and I thought perhaps he could give us an update as to where he is on those. But I would guess our next quarterly meeting is at the end of March. So it's something I'm sure the board would like to get some input on so that we can approve those and continue with the SMART goals.
Okay, thank you. How was your board meeting at Bone Lake? How did that go?
Very well. Adam was there and gave a good update about all the good work he's been doing, and our Bone Lake community was very interested in the opportunities he's providing. So yes, it was a good meeting. Thanks.
Wonderful, thank you. Manager Taves.
Nothing to report.
Thank you. Manager Loth.
He's finally up while we're having a meeting so you can meet Edison.
Oh.
Say hi. Say hi.
Oh, there he is. Now I see him. Oh, wow, cutie. Does
So
he have
he's
red hair?
13 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
Say hi. It's almost feeding time, so.
Your time's running out.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, thank you for that. That was the highlight of the night. Manager Schmalz.
Yes, just a couple items. One is that you may not have seen it, but that Adam has been working on with staff on putting an ice jacking seminar together, and I just saw his recommendation to move forward on that, and looked very good. That's going to be, I think, March 26th for 2 hours at the American Legion Hall, and hopefully we'll get the Lake Association to allow us to. We're going to mail to all the people on Forest Lake, but we also like to mail to all the Lake Association members a couple times too. So that looks very encouraging. We've got some outside speakers, and then we've actually got some contractors speaking also. So I think we should get some really good attendance at that meeting. The second thing is that I don't know, I wasn't aware of this, and but I noticed that in tonight's Forest Lake paper, there's a nice article, half-page article on Meet the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District, and it
In the
kind of,
lowdown.
excuse me.
I said it was in the lowdown, not the Forest Lake Times.
You're right. It is the lowdown. That's very unusual that they would actually publish something like that. But okay, so that's great. But it should be in the Forest Lake Times too, but we can work on that. Anyway, it looks to me like this might be and Adam's not here, but it looks to me like this is an introductory article of our telling our story. So I would like to ask that Adam or other staff actually present what that program is going to be and what the other elements are going to be, so we know what's coming. And then I would also like to make the special request that we make a copy of that article and send it to the Forest Lake City Council and the new administrator each time the next article comes out, in case they haven't seen it. And it could be a cover letter from me, since I'm the representative of the Lake Association for the city, or it could come from Manager Anderson. You know, saying what we're doing, and we just want them to be aware of what's happening. And this would be a good inroads to actually have a regular meeting with them for an hour or so sometime. So those
I
are
just
my
wanna
two
note
thoughts.
that, sorry, Steve, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
Jackie B wrote that article.
Excuse me?
Jackie B wrote that article.
So it was a press release from us.
Yes,
Okay,
we had McKinney's approval, but yeah,
okay.
So is it going to be a series of articles then?
they called us on Friday. They were originally gonna do an article with the Forest Lake Association, and that fell through. And so they quickly called us up, and Jackie had previously worked for them, and so she was able to get them the information they needed quickly and correctly.
Okay, so it was a reaction rather than a planned effort.
Yeah,
So, which is fine, but I think I'm gonna kind of write a critique about, we were asked to do this and I never did do it, but I'm gonna try to write a critique about where we are today and what else has to be done. But one of the things we need to do, and Manager Anderson's been saying this for a long period of time, we need to tell our story. And once we get that story written, we can go out and have a series of articles in every paper, you know, one after another, taking the people down the path of where we started, the issues we faced, the challenges we had to solve them, the success we've had in solving them, and then what's required of the public in the future to protect what we have. So it's a nice story to tell, and I think it can be almost written around the timeline we have on our strategic plan that I think Manager Anderson has put in, which starts with pre-settlement up to today's time. So I'm going to try to get a draft done before I leave town here, and hopefully we can maybe circulate that around and try to maybe move forward on that whole concept. I think it's exciting. I think we got a good story to tell, and I think people are going to be very receptive, especially if we show a lot of pictures with it. So like we did here, these were interesting, I think. So good work.
We have that already in motion to hire a communications company to help us with that process. So I know that the RFPs have gone out. I don't think the final responses are in yet. I think they're due sometime later this week or next week, excuse me, in early March. So we are working on that. We've talked about that numerous times. And so we are moving forward to have a consultant that we can contract with in this specialty area. And we can do everything you're talking about doing and everything I've been talking about doing for a long, long time, as you mentioned, years. We're finally there, and I think we've got the right course of action. We started this 2 years ago, honestly. And so I am glad that we're at the point we're at now. Yeah, and we'll have a professional plan and we'll have a professional output. So I'm looking forward to that, as I know everybody is on the board, so, and the staff as well, because it's important that we're actually required to do it by statute, is to inform the public on what we're doing, how we're doing it, and what the results are. So we'll be fulfilling a number of areas that we need, that we've been deficit in. So I look forward to that. And the only thing are you done? I'm sorry, Manager.
No, I'm finished. Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you. The only thing I wanted to talk about and share with the board is I did go to the first public forum meeting on the vulnerability project, and it was very, very engaging. I think our Van Associates, I think that's the right one, that represents us in that area. They had big maps, blown up maps sitting on tables, so people could congregate around the area that was important to them, and then mark up with markers, what areas they were concerned about. And then I think people were taking notes, but also they had sticky notes that they could write and paste those on the exact location in the map. So I look forward to getting that report back to us. Are you going to be doing that or working with them? It's just them, right? Van, okay, associates, but it was very well laid out. It was very engaging for the public. And this was an area in the Big Comfort, area. And so I knew some of the people, I knew the issues, of course, in that area. So we had some really good interaction. Mike was there at the beginning, but had to leave for some school event for his youngest daughter. And so, yeah, we went the full time, which I wasn't expecting, but there was a lot of engagement. So that worked. Or any of you getting ready to do the others, that was a very good investment for us. The other thing is I did go to 2 now of the outreach sessions that we've been holding, and we had, as the report said, Mike's administrative report under that area, there were 22 people at the CARP session, which was very good turnout. The last one I went to was on climate change. We had a climate expert from the DNR. It was a small group. If you take board, just myself was there from the board, but if we take out the staff, another person, so there were probably 7 people from the public. It was a very small turnout, 9 total, but the information was very good. And once again, the people that were there were very engaged, asking a lot of questions, and the DNR individual did a wonderful job. And we got to see a lot of charts and graphs about the climate, what's happening in these changes. But there definitely is a trend upwards in the precipitation. And so what we're doing is right on track to help protect the area. So I wanted to share that with all of you. And that brings us to the summary and approval section under, let me get my glasses on number 11. I don't know if there was any tonight, but Chuck, do you have anything?
Madam Chair, I don't. There was Manager Schmaltz's talking about the district's telling its story. But it sounds like there's no immediate staff direction on that.
Well, there is. We're in the process. Yeah, but not for tonight. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. All right, that's it. All of our subject matter on the agenda has been covered, and so we are ready to adjourn. Is there a motion?
I will make that motion.
Thank you, Manager Taves. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion. Manager Schmaltz?
Thank you.
Oh, babies.
We're very
That
slow.
was,
All right, thank you.
I believe Edison seconded that motion.
Yeah, yes.
All right, who seconded that?
Addison,
Oh, okay, all right.
Manager Schmaltz.
All right, Manager Lowe,
Aye.
I think, yeah,
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
President Anderson.
aye. Good night, everyone.
Yeah, good meeting. Thanks,
Good
everyone.
night.
Good night.
Oh.